My name's Betty, and if there's one thing I've learned in life, it's that people mistake quiet for weakness. They mistake politeness for submission, and subtlety for poverty. My husband's parents, Robert and Helen, are the very embodiment of that mistake. Since the day I married their son Daniel, they've made it a quiet mission to look down their perfectly powdered noses at me. And they've gotten far too comfortable doing it. It started small offhand comments, little digs about my simple wardrobe or modest lifestyle. I'd walk into their immaculate dining room in their Greenwich, Connecticut mansion, and Helen's eyes would sweep over my clothes before she offered that razor-edge smile of hers. It was the kind of smile that didn't reach the eyes. Robert's tactic was more blunt. He'd lace his insults with faux concern. "Betty, maybe one day you'll have something nice of your own," he'd say over wine, as though he were talking about a stray dog he was trying to rehome. They didn't know, how could they, that before I met Daniel, I had built my own marketing consultancy in Boston from the ground up. I had signed corporate contracts worth hundreds of thousands of dollars before I was 30. My bank account was healthier than most hedge funds, but I had no desire to flaunt it. I was raised in Savannah, Georgia, by a family that valued hard work and humility, not flaunting or showboating. That was until Helen and Robert decided to make my humility their playground. The final straw came last Thanksgiving. We had driven down in Daniel's practical but unremarkable SUV. The kind of car you take on a road trip, but not the kind you make an entrance in. Robert greeted us at the door, glanced at the driveway, and frowned like he'd just spotted a roach in his wine. "If you're visiting this year," he said, "do us a favor and park your car on the street so the neighbors don't think we have visitors from downtown." Helen chuckled into her scarf as if he'd just delivered the cleverest joke she'd heard all year. I smiled that day, and said nothing. But inside, something in me shifted. It wasn't hurt. I had stopped caring about their opinion long ago. No, it was the kind of slow, searing anger that turns into a plan. I didn't just want to correct them. I didn't want to win their approval. I wanted to make them choke on every single assumption they'd ever made about me. When we got back home to Boston, Daniel noticed I was quieter than usual. "You okay?" he asked over coffee the next morning. I told him I was fine, but my mind was already racing. My revenge wouldn't be a shout. It would be an explosion disguised as elegance. I wanted the impact to be unforgettable, undeniable, and humiliating, served on a silver platter with champagne. I pulled out my laptop that afternoon and started searching. Not for dresses or jewelry, not at first. No, I started with the car. If I was going to walk into their world, I was going to do it behind the wheel of something that screamed wealth and power. Not comfortable money, but the kind of obscene luxury that makes old money clutch their pearls. I called a dealer I knew in Los Angeles. We'd worked together before, back when I had treated myself to a limited edition Aston Martin just to celebrate a business milestone. I told him exactly what I wanted this time, something with presence. Something that would make Helen's coffee cup slip from her fingers. 2 days later, he sent me photos of a black Rolls-Royce Ghost, custom cream leather interior, mahogany trim, worth $410,000. It purred like sin. I wired the payment that afternoon, cash, no financing. But that was just the beginning. The car was the announcement, but I wanted the details to sting just as much. I booked an appointment at Tiffany's in New York and spent 2 hours under those bright, gleaming lights before settling on a diamond necklace worth $48,000, elegant enough to be tasteful, yet bold enough that Helen wouldn't be able to tear her eyes away from it. While I was there, I ordered Daniel a Patek Philippe watch, $39,000, because if I was going in swinging, I wanted him looking the part too. When I told Daniel my plan, he laughed, but it wasn't a laugh of dismissal. It was a laugh of disbelief. "Betty, you're going to destroy them," he said, shaking his head. "Good," I replied. "They've had it coming." The weeks before Christmas, I refined my plan like a general preparing for war. I scheduled the rolls to be delivered 2 days before our visit, making sure it was freshly detailed and polished to a mirror shine. I had my outfit custom made by a boutique in Chicago, a deep emerald silk dress that hugged my figure like it was made to because it was my shoes. Christian Louboutins. Not because I needed the red solace, but because I wanted Helen to see them. When the morning of our visit came, I wasn't nervous. I was ready. Daniel and I slid into the rolls, and the engine's deep hum vibrated through my bones. The drive to Greenwich felt different this time, not a visit, but a performance. I was going to play the part they'd never imagined for me, and I was going to make them regret every smirk, every whisper, every insult. We pulled into their neighborhood, the manicured lawns stretching like smug little empires. When we turned onto their street, I saw Helen through the front window, sipping her coffee, her posture perfect. The moment the rolls glided into the driveway, her head tilted slightly, her smile freezing mid-sip. Robert came out next, still in his slippers, squinting at the car like it had no right to be there. "Nice rental," Robert called, his voice carrying that familiar condescension. I opened the door, stepped out, and adjusted my necklace so the sunlight caught the diamonds. "Not a rental," I said smoothly. "Mine." Helen blinked, and for the first time since I'd met her, she had no immediate comeback. That silence? That was the sound of victory beginning to take shape. But I wasn't finished. Because what they didn't know was that this visit wasn't just to see them. It was to set the stage for something much, much bigger. The morning of the visit felt like the calm before a storm, except I wasn't the one in danger. No, I was the storm. Daniel stood in the doorway, watching me clip the final piece of my diamond necklace into place. It shimmered in the morning light like it had been waiting for this moment its entire life. His navy suit was pressed and tailored to perfection, the Patek Philippe glinting at his wrist. He still looked slightly nervous, like a man about to watch his wife drop a live grenade in the middle of his parents' dinner table. "You know," he said, tightening his tie, "my mother's probably going to be in shock for days." I smiled, sliding into my Louboutins. "Good, let it be a long shock, the kind she can't stop talking about." When we stepped outside, the black Rolls-Royce Ghost sat in the driveway like a panther waiting to pounce. The paint gleamed so sharply it could have cut glass. The cream leather inside was soft as a whisper, the mahogany trim warm and rich. I ran my fingers over the steering wheel and felt that deep, luxurious hum as I started the engine. The drive to Greenwich was long enough for me to savor what was coming. I pictured Helen's smirk faltering, Robert's brow furrowing in confusion, the exact moment they'd realized they had spent years misjudging me. And then I pictured the rest of the evening, the moment I'd twist the knife. We turned onto their street, the houses lined up like smug little trophies, each with its perfect lawn, each silently competing with the next. Their home, a pristine white colonial with black shutters, stood at the end of the block like it owned the whole damn neighborhood. Helen was already outside, coffee cup in hand, wrapped in an expensive-looking robe. She squinted at the car pulling into her driveway, her expression tightening the closer we came. Robert joined her, wearing that smug half-grin he reserved for anyone he thought was beneath him. The moment the rolls stopped, I caught the subtle shift in his expression. His eyes ran over the hood, the grille, the unmistakable spirit of ecstasy, emblem gleaming in the sun.
He muttered something under his breath before leaning forward slightly.
"Nice rental," Robert said, voice dripping with dismissal. I opened the door and stepped out, letting the sunlight catch the diamonds at my throat. I turned toward him with the slow, deliberate smile of a woman who has already won. "Not a rental," I said, my tone honey-sweet and sharp as glass. "Mine." Helen's lips parted slightly, and for a fraction of a second, she forgot to keep her mask in place. I saw the flicker of surprise, and something else. Jealousy. The kind of jealousy that eats at someone long after the moment's gone. Daniel stepped out of the passenger side, buttoning his suit jacket. He looked like he belonged in the pages of a luxury magazine, and I could feel both of them cataloging every detail. We walked past them toward the front door. Helen finally spoke, her voice a touch too high. "Well, you've certainly made an entrance." "Oh, this." I glanced over my shoulder, almost dismissive. "Just something I picked up in Los Angeles last week." Inside, the house smelled of fresh flowers and Money Robert and Helen's favorite perfume. The walls were lined with oil paintings, antique furniture, and strategically placed family photos where Helen and Robert always seemed to be front and center. Helen motioned us toward the living room. "Would you like some coffee?" "No, thank you," I said, settling into the cream leather armchair like I owned the place. "We had some on the drive down." Daniel's parents in Boston sent us a special roast from a small batch roaster. They only make about 100 pounds a year. Quite a treat. Robert's brow furrowed, and I caught the way Helen's jaw tightened. Every word I spoke was a reminder that I played in a league they hadn't even considered for me. After a few minutes of stiff small talk, Helen's eyes landed on my necklace. That's new, isn't it? I looked down as though I'd forgotten I was wearing it. Oh, this. Just something I picked up at Tiffany's in New York. 48,000, Daniel insisted. His eyes flicked toward me in surprise, but he didn't correct me. Smart man. Robert cleared his throat. Well, I suppose your business must be doing well then. I smiled without warmth. Extremely well. In fact, I just closed a deal last week that's going to net me more than this house is worth. I let my gaze sweep across the room slowly, deliberately. And I do mean this house. Silence, just the ticking of the antique clock on the mantel. Helen's smile froze on her face, her knuckles whitening around her coffee cup. Robert shifted in his seat, his earlier smugness nowhere to be found. I leaned back, crossing my legs, and decided it was time to set the stage for the next part of my revenge. You know, I began casually, Daniel and I have been thinking about expanding. We've been looking at property in the Hamptons. Nothing massive, just something in the 3 to 4 million range for summers. The boat will be docked there, of course. Helen blinked. Boat? Yes, I said, with the satisfaction of a knife sliding between ribs. I bought Daniel a 42-foot yacht last month. It's docked in Miami at the moment. We'll bring it up once the weather turns. The silence that followed was heavy, almost delicious. Helen glanced at Robert, and Robert stared at me like he was trying to decide if I was serious or if I had just invented a new way to ruin his evening. I knew in that moment they really understood, that their image of me as poor Betty from nowhere was not just wrong, but laughably so. I hadn't just surpassed their expectations, I had obliterated them, and this was only the beginning. The rest of the evening I let the diamonds, the dress, and the car do most of the talking. Every word I spoke was calculated, every glance deliberate. I wasn't just visiting them. I was dismantling years of smug superiority piece by piece. When it was finally time to leave, we stepped out into the crisp night air. The rolls sat waiting, polished and perfect. Helen and Robert stood in the doorway, watching. I slid into the driver's seat and lowered the window. Next time, I said, my voice cool and confident, I'll bring the jet. The look on their faces was worth every dollar I'd spent. As we pulled away, I didn't need to look back to know they were still standing there, wondering how they had so badly underestimated me. What they didn't know was that Chapter 3 of my revenge was already in motion. Dinner that night was a performance, and I had the starring role. The dining room was set exactly how I remembered it, crystal glasses lined up like soldiers, silver cutlery polished until it gleamed, and that long mahogany table that seemed to stretch like a runway between me and my in-laws. Helen's obsession with appearances was in every detail, and it was going to make my next moves even sweeter. She served the first course herself, lobster bisque in delicate porcelain bowls. Her smile was brittle, the kind you wear when you're trying to keep control but know it's slipping. I could feel her eyes flicking to my necklace between ladles of soup, her gaze snapping back whenever I met it. Robert, on the other hand, wasn't even pretending to be subtle. He leaned back in his chair and studied me like I was some strange creature he couldn't quite classify. After a long pause, he finally spoke. So, Betty, he said, swirling his wine, what kind of loan did you take out for that rolls? It was bait, cheap and obvious, but I wasn't here to bite, I was here to gut. I set my spoon down and looked him dead in the eye, my voice smooth but with a steel edge. Paid in full, I said. Wire transfer. And before dessert I bought Daniel a boat, 42 feet. Docked in Miami. The silence that followed was delicious. It was the kind of silence that swells, heavy with unspoken thoughts. I could almost hear the gears grinding in their heads as they tried to calculate how that was possible. Helen broke first, letting out a laugh that was too high, too rehearsed. Oh, Betty, you've done well for yourself. I leaned forward slightly, resting my elbows on the table. I've done more than well, Helen. I've done enough to ensure Daniel and I never have to rely on anyone, ever. Her smile faltered just enough to satisfy me. We moved on to the main course, perfectly roasted beef tenderloin with a rich red wine reduction. The flavors were exquisite, but what I was really savoring was the tension building across the table. I waited until Robert had taken his first bite before reaching into my bag. From it, I pulled a black leather envelope and slid it across the table to Daniel. He glanced at me, a flicker of curiosity in his eyes, before opening it. Inside was a single piece of paper, crisp, official, and very expensive. Daniel's smile spread slowly as he read it. "It's a deed," he said, glancing at his parents. "To a house in the Hamptons, 3.2 million. He looked back at me, still grinning. "In your name." I tilted my head, watching their faces. "Thought we'd have a place closer to the coast for summer. It's got a private dock, so the boat will fit perfectly." Helen's fork slipped against her plate with a sharp clang. Robert's jaw tightened, his eyes narrowing just enough for me to see the flicker of irritation behind them. I pressed on. "It's funny," I continued, swirling my wine lazily, "how quickly things can change. One minute, people think they know you, your worth, your place, and the next, they realize they've been looking at you all wrong. It must be disorienting." Helen's fingers tightened around her wine glass. "We've never—" "Oh, Helen," I interrupted, my tone as soft as silk. "You don't have to pretend. I remember the comments, the little smirks. The way you talk about real success while looking right at me. You thought I didn't notice?" She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Robert cleared his throat. "Well, if you're doing so well, I suppose congratulations are in order." His voice was flat, hollow. The forced civility of a man who has realized the game is no longer in his control. I smiled. "Oh, Robert, I don't need your congratulations. I'm not here to impress you. I'm here because Daniel wanted to visit. The rest," I gestured to my necklace, my dress, the car parked outside, "is just for fun." The rest of dinner was thick with tension. Every time Helen asked a polite question about my work, I answered in a way that made her facade crack just a little more. I spoke about meetings in Manhattan penthouses, contracts that required six-figure retainers, and casual lunches at country clubs where membership fees alone were more than most people made in a year. It wasn't bragging, not exactly. It was simply giving them a glimpse of the world I lived in, a world they had never imagined I could inhabit, let alone command. By dessert, the message was clear. I wasn't the quiet little woman they could look down on anymore. I was the one holding the upper hand, and I wasn't afraid to use it. As Helen served the final course, a decadent chocolate soufflé, I raised my glass in a mock toast. "To change," I said. "And to remembering that not everything is as it seems." Daniel clinked his glass against mine, his smirk matching my own. Helen's smile was tight, brittle. Robert didn't even bother to hide his scowl. When we finally stood to leave, the Rolls was waiting, headlights washing over the driveway. I could feel their eyes on me as I slipped into the driver's seat, the leather embracing me like victory itself. I lowered the window, the engine's low purr filling the cold night air. "Next time," I said, my voice calm and deliberate, "I'll bring the jet." The look on their faces, shock, envy, and the bitter taste of defeat, was the sweetest thing I'd had all night. And as we drove away, the quiet inside the car was filled with the unspoken truth. The war they thought they'd been winning had been over before it even began. They just hadn't realized they'd lost. We left the next morning, but not before I made sure the final act of my plan unfolded exactly the way I wanted it to. Robert and Helen stood in the driveway, still in their robes, pretending they were simply out to get the paper. I could see the bitterness in their eyes even as they forced polite smiles. I started the Rolls with that deep, unmistakable purr that turns heads. The sound alone was a reminder of every moment they had underestimated me. I lowered the window and looked at them. "Next time," I said evenly, "I'll bring the jet." Helen's smile faltered just a fraction, and Robert's jaw twitched before he caught himself. It was the kind of reaction that tells you you've landed a hit right where it hurts most. But I wasn't satisfied with just leaving them stewing in their own wounded pride. No, they had spent years smirking behind my back, making me the butt of their private jokes. If I left now, the win would be quiet. I wanted it loud. I wanted it public. I already had the perfect opportunity lined up. 2 weeks earlier, I had received an invitation to the Greenwich Charity Winter Gala, one of the most exclusive events in the city. Attendance was strictly by invitation only, and Helen had been on the planning committee for years. It was her stage, her social territory, the place where she reigned as queen among the wives of old money. And I was going to steal that crown right in front of her. The night of the gala, Daniel and I arrived in the Rolls, its black exterior gleaming under the golden lights of the hotel's entrance. The valet barely touched the handle before I stepped out in a floor-length crimson gown, custom-made in Manhattan, with a slit high enough to make a statement and a diamond bracelet that caught the light with every movement. Daniel wore a tuxedo that fit him like it was sewn onto his skin, the Patek Philippe glinting on his wrist. The moment we stepped inside, heads turned. I could see women in designer gowns whispering to each other, men glancing at Daniel, then at me. That was exactly the reaction I wanted. It meant the whispers would reach Helen before I even spoke to her. When we finally spotted her across the ballroom, she was surrounded by her circle of well-dressed admirers, her laughter just a bit too loud, her posture too perfect. She didn't see us at first, her back was turned, but when she did, I saw her face freeze for a split second before she plastered on that smile. "Betty," she said, her voice laced with sugar and steel, "what a surprise." I stepped closer, taking her hand lightly, as if we were the oldest of friends. "Helen," I said warmly, "you look lovely, and this event, well, it's just stunning. I can see why they keep you on the committee." It was a calculated compliment, just enough to sound genuine, but with an undertone she'd hear loud and clear. "I know exactly how much you need this status." She tried to regain the upper hand. "I didn't know you were coming," she said, her eyes scanning me from head to toe. "Oh yes," I replied casually. "One of the sponsors insisted on inviting me after I closed a partnership deal with them. Apparently, they thought my presence would elevate the guest list." Her lips tightened ever so slightly. When the charity auction began, the real show started. The items up for bid were lavish private villa stays in the Caribbean, artwork from up-and-coming painters, a week-long Napa Valley wine tour. Normally, Helen was the big spender in these rooms, winning bids with that satisfied smirk that came from knowing no one could match her. Not tonight. The first high-ticket item came up, a diamond-studded watch. Starting bid $20,000. Helen raised her hand at $25,000. Without missing a beat, I raised mine.
35, I said. Gasps. The auctioneer's smile widened.
Helen countered at $40,000, her voice steady but her eyes flicking toward me. I raised my hand again. 50. The crowd murmured. Helen hesitated. She tried one more push. 55. But I didn't even blink. 70, I said. The room went silent. The auctioneer slammed the gavel down. "Sold!" I smiled at Helen sweetly. "It's for charity, after all." It went on like that all night. Every time she bid, I outbid her, never obnoxiously, never so fast it looked like a duel, but just enough that the entire room could see the pattern. The whispers grew. I caught snippets as people passed. "Who is she? Helen's not taking this well? Betty? Oh, she's married to Helen's son." By the time the final item, a luxury yacht trip, was announced, Helen was pale. The starting bid was $60,000. She didn't even raise her hand. I did, and I won. As the night wound down, the ballroom buzzed with chatter. Helen was no longer holding court. She stood at the edge of the room, her shoulders tight, Robert whispering something into her ear. I decided to end the night with one last strike. I approached her slowly, giving her plenty of time to see me coming. When I reached her, I placed a hand lightly on her arm. "Helen," I said softly, so only she could hear, "I hope you're not upset. I only wanted to make sure the charity got as much as it could, besides." I let my gaze sweep over the glittering room. It's nice to show people that our family can still make an impression. Her eyes narrowed, but she forced another smile. "Of course, Betty, of course." I leaned in just a little closer. "Next year," I whispered, "maybe I'll sponsor the event. Then you can take the night off." I stepped back, letting the words hang there, and walked away before she could respond. When Daniel and I slid back into the Rolls, the city lights reflecting off the hood, he turned to me with a look that was equal parts admiration and disbelief. "You didn't just win," he said. "You burned the place down." I laughed, the sound bubbling up like champagne. Oh, darling, I said, this was never just about winning. This was about rewriting the story they told themselves about me and making sure they'd never forget it. From that night on, things changed. Helen stopped making those little digs. Robert stopped with the condescending questions. They were polite, careful, almost deferential, but the best part? They never mentioned the gala. Not once, which told me everything I needed to know. Now every Christmas, Helen sends me glossy brochures for luxury cruises with a handwritten note. You'd enjoy this, Betty. I know she's trying to keep up, but she never will. Because this was never about having more money than them. It was about showing them what happens when you mistake quiet confidence for weakness. And in America, nothing speaks louder than the sound of a Rolls-Royce pulling away while your enemies stand in the cold, watching, knowing they'll never catch up.